I've never heard one of these came up.
Yeah.
Call to order the October 5th, 2010 City of Milton Design Board. If we could start with the pledge of allegiance, please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'd like to start out with an introduction of our board members. If we could start on my left.
Bruce Smitherman, Vince Lozano,
Terry Herr,
Kathy Cook.
Mark Neckus.
Jim Brown.
and we have one member that is currently not here. I think she's scheduled to be here, but we'll proceed without her at this point in time. Next item on the agenda is approval of the September action minutes. Do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the September action minutes.
Second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Passes. Okay, we'll get into the meat of the actual meeting this evening. Let's start with item 4, which is a demo permit for Karen Brewery at 14470 Thompson Road. It's a demo for a single-family house. Do we have a representative here?
Karen Drury, and the address is 14470 South Thompson Road.
Could you state reasons for the demolition and any other issues?
Right, the reason for the demolition is the home has been empty for quite some time, and it's not livable, and it's also not renovatable.
It's not, what was the last thing?
It's not renovatable.
Oh,
All the copper's been stolen out of the house. The goal is to demo, and at some point, I hope to rebuild a home for myself there.
I don't see, anybody's minute that's on the historic. It wouldn't be old enough to be on the historic register, so I don't see any issues with
I
it.
think it was built in 1983.
Any public comment? Public comment?
I'll make a motion to approve the demolition permit at 14470 Thompson Road with the condition that no specimen trees are impacted as part of the.
It's not. When the house was built, in fact, most of the trees are probably anywhere from 80 to 100 feet out from the house in all directions.
I'll second. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next item is building permit review for a construction trailer for the new Fulton County High School on, I guess that would be on Bethany Road or Highland. I'm not sure which it's located off of. Evergreen Construction, do we have a representative? No representative? No?
Just in discussing this, I don't see a problem with where they're putting this on the site plan, as long as they follow the standards that we've required other temporary construction trailers.
It looks like it's definitely on the Cocker Road entrance. Right.
Any other additional?
I guess this is probably gonna be a lame addition, but essentially, his location at the main entrance point to go from the site, we just need to make sure that they site it in such a way that the access is from the south and not from the north. Does that make sense?
Based on this parking lot?
Yeah,
Oh, I see.
otherwise it basically people walk out the
Truck traffic. Well, it's definitely gonna be visible from Cocker Road. Usually, this is an awning or something. It's gonna
guess it would be similar to the last one that we permitted at the last meeting, which was,
Sharp residential.
yeah.
This is gonna be way more visible than that.
I don't know.
This
the
isn't a
difference-
sales trailer.
Yeah.
This is just merely a construction trailer.
Plus, so they're not gonna have landscaping out the front, like the sales trailer and do it,
Okay.
and move that. But I don't know.
Any public comment? Public comment?
I'll make a motion to approve the construction trailer for the new Fulton County High School, with condition that they install the skirting around the bottom if we've required in other construction trailers.
I second the motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Next is a courtesy variance review, 705 Quarter Path Lane. Request to allow a fire pit to be located in the minimum side yard setback. We have a representative?
My name is Randy Bacon, address 705 Quarter Path Lane. We're here to get variance for a fire pit to be placed in our backyard, which is apparently ruled that we live on the corner of Freemanville and Quarter Path Lane, that the true backyard would be the right side of our house from the apparently old written rule or something.
So the fire pit comes out to the side and not directly behind, is that what they're saying? So
Yeah.
it's past the footprint of the house?
No, the front is
They're calling it
Freemanville. Yeah.
So this is a side yard?
Oh, I.
No, it's in the backyard.
Yeah, it's what you
It's
think
in
is
his
correct.
backyard, but
It's what
technically,
zoning calls the side yard.
yeah, that's why he's here.
The end of your driveway.
Yes.
Well, I don't see an issue. This is already built? Or no, this is
No.
just a picture of what you want?
That's a picture of what we want.
Okay.
There's a patio there. It's
Partially built.
I don't see an issue with it.
Mr. Chairman? Yes. A couple things, I just need to need to say for the record. One of them is that, and we talked about this a little before, is, I think we probably need to have at least a little bit of clarification to try and determine whether or not a fire pit is a fireplace, and whether or not it's, how we're to deal with these. Because the reality is that from a structural standpoint, it's no more than a curb. A tall curb, but a curb. And so it's not really a structure in the conventional sense. And so whether or not we should approve it or it's, something that we need to try and probably get some guidance on for that. The other thing is, from a pure variance standpoint, it unfortunately does not meet the variance considerations. There's three different considerations that are included in the zoning resolution of Fulton County, 22.3.1. First one talks about relief if granted in harmony with and could be made to be in general purposes of the zoning resolution. That might meet, we be able to meet that. Second one, though, is the more stringent, more difficult one, and that is the application of a particular provision of the zoning resolution in a particular piece of property due to extraordinary and exceptional conditions. This is a situation where they've created the condition themselves, and it's not like the later part of it says, to create an unnecessary hardship for the owner while causing no detriment to the public. This is a situation where there's a lot of places to put this besides where it's at.
Well, I'll have to disagree, only because the front of their house is, what they are using as the front is Quarter Path Lane, so if, they wanna put it behind their house.
Well, that's fine,
That's
but
behind.
we're not telling them where to put it. They have nearly half an acre of other land where they're in another location. So it's not because of the topography, size, shape, or something unique about the piece of property.
I think it's something unique about the piece of property because, Freemanville, the city is saying that Freemanville is their front, but that's clearly the side that
Well,
is
just
built.
to clarify, I disagree, but I think the thing that's probably more important than all this, and I just wanted to bring this up, is that it's partially the existing uses around it are not going to be adversely affected. I just think that we need to make sure that we don't create a precedent where, because people unfortunately, get something partially constructed, that it automatically gets a variance, approval. So while this is probably appropriate, I just think we need to be careful that the way to circumvent the code is to start construction.
Well, and we're just here to listen to aesthetics, whether or not would be up for zoning appeal, so we're not really concerned as to whether you meet those requirements, I don't think, but aesthetics is what we're looking at.
Are you familiar with this aerial view that's included in the package?
Yes.
So is there any of this tree buffer that's on the rear?
That's often mistaken as a whole another lot. It's often mistaken as that's another lot that somebody could put a house on. I mean, it's a large buffer between our home and Freemanville Road.
And usually, before you go to the Board of Zoning Appeals meeting, if you just get a letter from your adjacent neighbor that they're okay with it, then they're the only ones that are gonna be impacted by really what you're doing, and they're the only ones that are gonna be able to see it, so I
Right.
think if, they're okay with it, then
Yeah, and they're actually the neighbors to our right were supposed to be here tonight. I guess they couldn't make it.
I would just make sure they're at the Board of Zoning Appeals meeting with you, and, I mean, looking at this, I can see how you would think that that's the rear yard, that's the back of your house.
Can I ask you where the pool is built?
Excuse me?
The pool, where is that built?
In the backyard?
I mean, is it just built or is it?
Yeah.
So
Yes.
that's in the side yard too,
This whole thing is part of the same project.
so.
Yeah.
How do you get it?
Pools are allowed in the side yard.
See, I'm baffled that this is even before us,
Yeah.
myself.
Well, yeah, fire, but, well,
Again, the fire pit is no different than a retaining wall. It's,
yes, anything with smoke and fire, that was the concern, I guess. I don't know.
I think that would be our comments. This is just cursory review.
we will really vote on
I
this.
mean, I can see how you would think that that's the rear yard. It's almost a challenge to interpretation. But that's still more zoning appeal, so you might as well stay on that.
Okay.
I don't think the board as a whole, and I'll speak just for the board myself, we don't see any issues with patio in a side yard,
Right.
so.
Well, there's another interesting point here, that your address on quarter path, right?
Correct.
You make the point that it's not, the frontage is not.
No, there's a specific definition about the front. It's the, when you're on a corner, it's the smallest frontage.
Well, I think you're, situated differently, but you can definitely present a hardship. That's just not good.
Okay.
That one's good.
So how do I
So
proceed
you'll,
from here? We just wait?
yeah,
till-
you'll get, the BZA will get a report from us that says that we found no issue with regard to it.
And then we're back.
And I'll see you on the 15th.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, have you put your sign up, your blue sign?
It's
Okay,
it's
all right.
still up. It has to stay up, right?
Oh, yeah, mm-hmm.
Short path, right there.
Next item is a courtesy review for, variance 10011, New Bader. It's an encroachment of, the side yard. Do we have anyone here? No one here for that.
Okay.
This is already built. The house is built. Must have it. Well, we're just looking at the aesthetics again, we don't decide whether there's a hardship. I mean, this is built, and it looks like they're gonna remove the pool that's under construction, clearly.
Yeah, they can't fix that.
Yeah, so I would just say that,
I don't think we have enough of the house to be able to make a determination. Are we making a determination on the site plan? So all we have is one photograph of one elevation of
yeah,
the house.
so that's already built, over the 25-foot building setback limit.
So what are we giving,
We don't determine if it's a hardship, we just, their
No.
This?
Well, it became an issue when the pool started going in. The pool company didn't do any of their own measuring. When they started building the pool, they just pulled their measurements off the house, and then lo and behold, we found out the house was built incorrectly. And the neighbors made a comment about the pool being too close.
So the pool is gonna be removed.
Yeah.
Says a removal, the recommendation, I guess, would be removal of pool, but then also some, it looks like landscape strip should be planted if they're gonna be granted to have that house so close to the house built.
14 feet from the setback, what would be allowed to in that zone?
25.
So we're at 11 feet short.
Oh, that's a 20-foot drainage easement, so they can't plant in that drainage easement. They'd have about 5 feet side of the house. It's a drainage easement. So I guess you could do a, I mean, the only thing that's gonna fit beside the house is shrubs, so you could, and that's not gonna spread.
It's a lot of the house too, I mean, it's like,
Few in the front corner, isn't it?
yeah.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
that's not our call.
Yeah, exactly. You're the one. I mean, it would be nice.
There's really anything that can be done to mitigate this condition.
The only thing you do is actually try and capture more land from the neighbor.
I would just say, this, when it shows a drainage easement, but it doesn't show, an underground pipe. So it may just be an above ground swale. So planting is permitted by the, city of Milton Engineering Department. Shall be required. Evergreen Spring, if it's permitted within that drainage easement. 'Cause it looks like, it may just be above ground, unless I'm missing.
Well, if the pool's not there, is there a concern anymore? I mean, the neighbors.
Yeah, that house, there should be that. No, it's just first.
So do we have any kind of consensus from the board with regards to land, if they can put some landscape screening up? Yeah.
Well, I think that we have to leave it to the Milton Engineering Department, and they can determine if it's underground pipe. If not, I believe they'll allow evergreen screening.
Okay, so the consensus, I assume from the board would be to mitigate the problem would be to, have landscape screen property line.
Okay.
Next is a courtesy variance review for, variance 10012 for Habitat for Humanity. This is to allow a asphalt recreation court in place at the development. See that? Okay.
Good evening, I'm Dave McLaughlin from 380 Saddlehorn Circle in Collinsville. I'm a land development manager for the local affiliate of Habitat for Humanity and representing the Homeowners Association tonight. I wasn't sure exactly if you wanted a presentation. I can give you a short presentation on the plan if you would like that. The plan has been in the works for 2-3 years. We've been building over there, as you all might know. Just to remind you where it is, I don't know if you all know where the subdivision is, but it's just off Highway 9, north of Webb Street, and it's about halfway between the Super Target and the Kohl's, but on the opposite side of the street. The center island is what we have yet to complete. We're on the last 4 townhomes, and we're trying to do the landscaping for the last 4 townhomes in the center island at the same time. We haven't been able to do that yet, Center Island, because of the construction trailers and the like. So all the families out there are anxious to get their recreational area built. What we've got is, with the diversity of children we have out there age-wise, they range from preschool all the way up through high school, and fairly evenly divided between preschool, elementary, middle school, and high school. So what the homeowners and the Stone Creek Church, who were one of the major sponsors and ones that wanted to work with us on the playground, what the principal desires of those two groups were to have a large open area for the children just to go out and play in, and then areas that could accommodate the various activities of the different age groups. And so we came up with this plan. This plan has been reviewed by the homeowners recently, and it was unanimously agreed that they supported it. And what it shows is, on the right-hand side over here is the large open area that they can go out and just play in. Over on the left-hand upper portion of the Center Island is an area that has a play set on it, and mulched area there where they can be safe. It's a very sentimental and special play set for us, because the play set is being donated by a family from Stone Creek whose son was lost through a very tragic accident. So that's the history behind that one. And then down below the play set is a recreational court, and it's supposed to support all kinds of activities. We'll have a basketball goal up, as well as painting. In addition to that, we figure it's just a large concrete surface that the children are going to be able to go out there and do either basketball or all the way down through hopscotch. They can draw on it, and be a safe area away from the streets. The plantings, they wanted open areas, so the whole area that's plantable is being planted with the TIF Sport Bermuda sod, and then the trees that you see, there are 7 of them, are level oaks, and those fit in with the landscaping for the entire subdivision. The plantings we have here just kind of fit and mirror those things. The smaller plants that you see, the one in the lower right-hand corner, those are some of the Nellie Stevens hollies with underplantings of, and you have to understand my pronunciation of some of these things. I'm not a plant person. The Howard I. Ligustus, and then the also some underplantings of the A.W. Spirea. Now that part of the planting is supposed to provide kind of a screen area that the homeowners would like to have between these recreational areas back here and the entrance to the subdivision. There's one other kind of a separation area planting, and that's in between the play set up here and the recreational court next to it, and that's to just have a separation between the two. Those are the crepe myrtles with the Indian hawthorns, kind of as an underplanting. I didn't talk about the sidewalk down the middle of it. That's just a concrete sidewalk 6 feet wide with handicap access at each curb. There are 2 handicapped individuals in the subdivision right now, 1 child and 1 adult, and we want to make sure that they had access into the area, not only for recreation, but just going out and having an area to enjoy. The problem, I guess, arose in our planning when we wanted to add the court in for a big diversity of activities, and there's the ordinance that Milton has says that you cannot put in a private recreational court within 100 feet of the adjoining property line. Okay? And we really have 2 adjoining property lines. The one that's right that's in the inner circle for the common property, which is this dashed line right here. And then the other property line, which really touches the other property, which is across the street, it's across the right-of-way. If you look at the closest point on the court right here to this adjoining property line, it's about 3 feet, okay? But then you go across the grassy area in the street, and this property line that is actually next to the homes, that's another 50 feet. So there are 53 feet here. If you're including or you're calling this the adjoining property line, we only have 3 feet. But it doesn't matter which property line you use. Both cases cut out the whole center island, except for the best case with using this property line, except for just a very small strip that makes the whole island unusable for the recreational items that we'd like to install. So that's why we're asking for a variance, is to be able to put those things in. The homeowners have supported it. The problems might have been noise. They're not worried about the noise. The kids are already out there playing in the areas, making the same amount of noise that they would be otherwise. There aren't really any lighting concerns because we're not going to put lights out for people to use them at night. The only lights that will be in the area will be the street lights that are already there. Yeah.
And external to the development itself, what's the closest property line or neighbor to this development itself?
We have two townhome subdivisions, one just north of this one, it's the Regency, and then one just south of this one, which is the park. So they're townhome subdivisions.
And those would be beyond the 100-foot requirement?
Oh, yeah, yeah. When I looked at the reg and it said you had to send out letters, I thought we had to send them out, but you all sent them out for within 300 feet of the site. That included some of those people on the north and the south. But the 100 feet from the back of curb to back of curb here is 135 feet. So if you go back in here, the 100 feet doesn't really play.
Mr. Chairman, I think that the intent of the ordinance is that people who are to have a private sport court are to have a buffer between adjacent property owners. I don't think that the ordinance foresaw a situation where the sport court would be for the use of all of the residents for whom the thing would abut. And so I think that we have a different situation completely. To me, it seems extremely straightforward to imagine that the outside property that you're talking about is the applicable property line, not the ones that are the intermediate, because these are all essentially common areas for all the people who would be using it. Right. The one thing I would propose, though, to the for this application is that they have security lighting in there in the evening, and that they provide a mechanism whereby there'll be cutoff fixtures or something that will keep all that security lighting into the sport area. But otherwise, it seems extremely straightforward.
We are a little concerned about security in the neighborhood, and having lighting out there may pose a problem, because we are a little concerned about kids from other neighborhoods coming in, and that's why we weren't going to light at night, and that's the wish of the homeowners also.
Are there street lights?
There's a street light right over in this area right here.
Yeah.
There are 4 street lights out there, yes.
I think you're going to find that, my opinion only, is that you're creating a nuisance that essentially is going to be too attractive. You're going to probably have to put lighting in there just to keep people out of it. And an ironic thing is it's too dark. You're going to have other nefarious element that you're going to have in there that you probably don't want either. So I think you're going to have to...
Well, there is a street light right here.
But with those plantings and stuff, though, I think you're going to find that that's going to be a pretty dark little area. And clearly, it has to be dark enough so that it's not bleeding over the property line of the sport court into people's, units. So I think they could put cutoff fixtures to accomplish that, though.
I think that's a good idea. And this is a courtesy review. The only other comment that I would add is that this not get flip-flopped to where the court is built on the other half that's closer to Highway 9.
Right.
That you
Yeah.
leave it the way it is just because of the visibility. It's screened with the green space.
I have a question. The tree screen that's in the east corner right there that really blocks the whole thing from Highway 9. How, to begin with, how tall is that screen going to be?
Well, it's Nellie Stevens, they climbed 15 to 25 feet. They're pretty thick.
Yeah. Well, to begin with, will that be, what will we have to start with?
6 feet tall.
Okay, 6 feet to begin with. Okay,
And
thank you.
This area up here, if you come in, it's a little above to begin with. It's, a few feet above. So if you add the height of the plants to that, it'll add some.
The island is definitely visible from Highway 9.
Is the swing set area going to be fenced or anything
No.
with it? So
No, it'll
there's not
have
any
a,
real security issues from the standpoint of young children running out into the street or anything?
The parents really, the way they monitor them out there, they're going to be out there.
Okay. Any other?
I actually think that we should discuss, beyond the ability of this body, but I think this is a desirable configuration. And, I would think that this would be something that not only should we keep people from having to get variances to achieve, but we should probably incentivize it. I think it's a nice addition.
Sure.
Good plan.
Thank you.
It'll be a nice addition.
What, is there some action that we need to take?
There'll be a report that'll be issued to the Board of Zoning Variances that will reflect the conversations that we've had, and it will, support the actual development itself. So
They're pretty much just looking for the happy face or the frowny face.
the
We'll
one
make a
thing,
motion on this.
the one thing that obviously can help is if you have the homeowners, a few of the homeowners there
Affected.
that are affected by it, maybe at the BZA meeting or letters from them or.
We have a letter signed by everyone that was present at the homeowners meeting that we had, and that was everybody that was available in the subdivision, all 25 of the 29 homes.
That's a tremendous turnout,
They all
actually.
signed the letter to that.
Yeah.
Now it'll just move on to
This is just courtesy.
Board of Zoning Appeals.
Thank you all.
Good
Thank
luck.
you.
Good luck with your project.
It looks nice. Yeah, what if the affected neighbor voices a concern later for a subsequent property owner? Says, how'd this happen? But it looks good, it's an improvement for sure.
That's nice, amenity.
Yeah, it is a nice amenity. I mean, it looks good in drawing, but if you had basketball banging around 50
Yeah.
feet from your living, from your
Well,
bedroom window.
What if they all sign?
Yeah.
Next item is a courtesy review variance for Doug and Janice Edmond at 13610 Hopewell Road. Anyone in attendance?
Mr. Chair, I spoke with Mr. Magoda late this afternoon, and he informed me that they are actually trying to work out an alternative so that they don't have to apply for the variance or go forward with the variance. So they've asked to defer this.
Okay.
Good, because I'm not really sure I understood it.
Yeah. This picture?
Yeah, why is that still?
Yeah, I was really, not really clear what
Show
that.
the
Stream.
Did staff put that in there? Okay, now I understand. I was just wondering why somebody would put that in their own application.
Yeah, yeah.
I wouldn't put that in there.
That's the best one I had.
Well, I can understand why staff would put it in there, I just didn't think the applicant would.
Next is the courtesy review for Pawpatch Vet Clinic on Crabapple Road. Do we have a representative here? Buried it somewhere.
Paul Gerardo, Great Design Studio, and representing my client. And basically what we're trying to do, we just want to kind of find out what we can and can't get away with on a piece of property. We were told that it needed to be 1 story and then
maybe be a little more commercial looking, on the rendering that I gave you, something close to what we had down here. But my client was really looking for something more residential, so I'm trying to, basically what I designed is what she's asked for. So I just need to see if this works. I need to start over.
Well, this would be somewhat in the character of the existing Wheeland home.
Modeled it behind, with what's across the street. Try to get as close as we could.
I think we're probably looking for more, something close to the ones where that we approved the Wheeling.
Yeah, the office buildings that are on Birmingham Highway, just behind the Shell station that's on the corner. There are some commercial office buildings there, and the character of those went through multiple design review boards. So, and they tend to be more residential in character. So you could use those to maybe help some of the inspiration with regards to it.
And I think they also matched the White House that's on the other side
Right.
of the, what's the restaurant?
Scoops or whatever.
Scoops and all of that. There's a white historic home there.
Victorian house, yeah.
And it had the big columns, it had the porch. And I think that those John Wheelan offices that are on Birmingham Highway picked up some of those elements, and they had some metal roofs over on the big columns. I think it would be nice to kind of, since you have the brick in between, is to try to pick up, some of those design elements.
Now, I'm not familiar with the one with the white columns. Is it kind of a traditional, does it still have a residential flair to it?
Yes.
It's a residential house that was,
Or so it is a house? Because that's basically all she's looking for is.
I don't know if you can see it in this.
Mr. Chairman?
It'd be nice.
You can't see it.
I think there's one significant delta, though, that you have to understand before all this other stuff, too. And that is that the intent of this region is that it is a pedestrian
Yes.
interactive area. And so rather than buildings that face inboard towards parking, the intent is that all the areas along these streetscapes interact with the street. And so if I understand your drawing correctly, it has all kinds of fenestration and architectural detail that faces inboard. However, it looks like the kennel areas that face Itasca Walk and part of it that faces Crabapple essentially are the backside storage area of the building of sorts, and that is the area that we would look to have the greatest amount of architectural detail and connection to the street. And so celebrating that corner, being able to deal down both streetscapes is really the intent of this particular overlay. And so what we have here is essentially backwards from that.
What I originally had is it was 180 degrees. Now, the way the interior of a vet clinic works, the vast majority of the interior, I'm not even supposed to usually have windows in, and it's the operating area, it's the kennels, it's the lab, the pharmacy. So there's really only one part of the building that is going to have anything to do with pedestrians. The vast majority of it's behind the scenes. And based on the depth of the property, I have to either be on one end or the other for it even to work with this, because the property is so narrow, I'm dealing with a rectangle.
I understand. However, I've had the same exact problem working with large residential or retail structures where you had essentially all the area in back is storage space or stock room or something else, and we've had the same requirement to be able to create connections through those spaces into the interior and create fenestration and detail along the exterior. So I'm sure that you're going to be super creative on this and come up with a way to be able to have a highly fenestrated, highly architecturally detailed dog area in some way that's still going to allow the same sort of connection to the space. And so, personally, I don't have any real problem with the direction this is, but I agree with the rest of the members of the group. But I think that the intent here really is that
Be a little bit formal.
that the connection to the streetscape be more obvious, and that the detail face the street.
Okay, if I did, again, basically, this is my parking area here, if I use this as a representative of what I've done. If I came down the side with a porch on the street side, again, I'm dealing with the square footage issue, and then rotate slightly forward, because again, the vast dimension of my building, I'm only going to have about a quarter of it that is going to face the street, if I even rotate the entrance around, to do that. If I took a porch similar to what this rendering does and run down the street itself, I mean, is that something that might be acceptable?
An
And
actual
then take this
entrance.
design in general, make it a little more formal to what you have here?
Well, I'm not sure that I understand your use of the word formal, but I don't want to try and design the thing for you, because I think that's inappropriate for us.
I'm just trying to see what my.
But I think that recognizing that you've got a pretty difficult pickle here, because you have a blank function on an area that you need a significant amount of architectural detail and fenestration. And so there has to be a way to be able to either fake that in or make it work in some way that they can accommodate the existing uses that you have there. Because clearly the floor plan is the floor plan, but you have to try and accommodate those uses.
In fenestration, it's just detail in general. I don't have to have fake windows or anything like that. Or, is that what you're asking for on fenestration?
Well, I'm one person, let's hear what the panel board has
I
to say.
think the ordinance, and let me find out where that was.
I think your two most important faces are going to be going into the residential area, and that's where now it's just
The blankest part of the
the
building.
blankest part of the building, and it has the fence. And then, of course, the most important is Crabapple Road, and those are the two sides that have the least features. Because that's not a good look going into the residential area.
I had it 180 degrees. I rotated per the client's recommendation, so I have no problem rotating it back. This would be the entrance into this subdivision bed. And, I don't have a problem creating a lot more detail here. I just want to make sure I'm not having to do like Walt Disney and create a whole bunch of fake storefronts. I mean, that's what I'm just trying to get a little bit of a parameter. I mean, if a porch works, gets the shades and shadows and textures, is that going to be enough to accommodate it, or?
Well, the ordinance under 12-3-.1, 12H36D5 pretty well defines what you're required to do, which is all the fenestration that is required on the right-of-ways has to be equal. So the fenestration on Crabapple, which there are percentages that are specified and everything else, has to also occur on the Itasca side of the building as well.
Itasca Walk.
Itasca Walk, yes.
What about the fencing?
Well, the fencing is prohibited in that location, especially on the corner. And then you are required to, the parking that is on the side of the building that fronts onto Crabapple has some fairly stringent requirements with regards to screening of it as well, too. I'm not thrilled with the dumpster location on the site plan myself either, because it's the first thing to see when you come in, but
That's right, once I rotate the building back around, again, her thinking was, is once I move the entrance to the residential side, everybody bringing their animals has effectively got to walk 100 and some feet to the front entrance. Originally, that's what I did based on the zoning or the overlay requirement. where I also had the dumpster, but she's just trying to make it a little more convenient for the people bringing in their animals.
Could you have
Because
a-
I can't slide the building, based on my setback requirements. It's pretty much, the building has to be in that particular location.
But she may be able to take advantage of that if you have the entrance on Crabapple and it's pedestrian friendly. I mean, there may be a retail component to her,
Yeah, she's going to have
veterinarian that,
some retail.
yeah, that you may have people that are walking around that
Could
stop
you-
in there.
I feel your pain. I mean, I'm a designer. I've got to do the same thing too. But the reality is that essentially to make these kinds of things work is you have to double up uses, meaning that you're going to end up probably, to make the thing work, having an access point from your parking and an access point from the street, which is really kind of the only way to be able to make that work. The other thing I think that we should try to stay away from is, I know that you probably could meet the requirements of the overlay with Mr. Potato Head architecture, where you stick things on the outside of the building. But I think that we want to try and stay away from, the Disneylandization, if there's such a thing, of the facade.
Yeah.
Because I did not want to go that.
Right, I understand. So I guess what we're looking for is for you to come up with a super snappy, really creative way to be able to do this, where all these uses are going to take place, and there's going to be a strong connection to the street in the corner.
Well, the biggest thing you've already said, okay, I mean, her biggest requirement, she wanted to have a residential feel to it. And so you
I don't think that's going to be a problem.
I think
No.
it's good to have a mix, as long as you're drawing from something that's already there.
thank you.
And this is actually the last bit of commercial, right now at least, within the Crabapple overlay. So this is this would be a transitional site coming from the residential into the commercial anyway, so makes perfect sense for it to have a residential character.
That was sort of the one thing she wanted to make sure I got accomplished. That's good. And one last thing, when this particular rendering, this is closer to what I have, but you prefer it to be closer to more.
Well, what we've tried to do is promote the rural aesthetic, the farmhouse aesthetic, as you would, of what Milton is. So, take from that inspiration. And we're not saying, it has to be Georgian Federalist style or whatever else, but
And I try to base it kind of on a barn because of the history of horses.
Right.
That was where the design came from.
yeah.
We don't have very many opportunities in this city for a legitimate downtown, because we've been kind of shoehorned into where we're at. So we have a couple of opportunities for retail development that can meet the character that's not essentially highway commercial. And so the intent really of this whole area is that it's sort of a mixed-use office retail centric area. And so that's kind of the aesthetic that we're trying to create. Whether it's a little bit more residential, I think in this particular location makes pretty good sense.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next is a courtesy building review for watercolors transitions, restaurants and community center school for students with autism. We have a representative here.
Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry. We had a request from the applicant to see if we could actually flip-flop the building review and the site review, or the rezoning review. Just figured the rezoning would be a little quicker.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Pete Hendricks, practice law at 6085 Lake Forest Drive in Sandy Springs. Robin's plugged in with a PowerPoint presentation to help walk you through what's being proposed. The property currently has a combination of O&I and C1 zoning, literally is right next door to where we are this evening. And what is being requested on the property is a rezoning to be able to go to the C1 district to compatibility, put under one umbrella, and zoning on the put on point The development scheme is to put on the property a 72-bed, 64,000 square foot structure, be up to 3 stories of height, and it is intended for seniors with autism. The next part of the application or structure is a 23,000 square foot structure, being deemed to be a special school, and so that's why we haven't asked for it along with the zoning. And that would be for residents of the as well as, generally speaking, folks in the Milton area. Again, being projected for the land plan calls for commercial retail on the property, and city then reviewing the staff determination that there's a mix of residential and special use, retail and commercial buildings contiguous in the immediate area of the property. There are 2 concurrent variances that are being requested in the application. The intent of those concurrent variances to be able to deliver a built-in-place that has a residential sense and feel to it, and not so much an institutional sense and feel to it. With that, I'd like to introduce Bill Swanson, who is the architect, who is also associated with the applicant, and he will work through the proposed plan and the schematic for the buildings. Thank you.
Thank you, Pete.
Appreciate the opportunity to present our project to you tonight for a courtesy review, and we look forward to getting comments from you on our designs. This is going to be a little awkward, but I might stand back because I have to read from the screen because a lot of the narrative is there. So if you could bear with me, but I'll speak as loud as I can if you can't hear me. Wow, technology at its finest. That's great. There we go. Terrific. Thank you.
Can't go very far.
Short leash.
I'll never make it as a lounge singer. I'm hoping that this works okay.
Okay, maybe I have to put it on.
Oh, wait. There we go. I'll kind of walk through a project summary. Basically, I want to correct one thing that Pete said earlier. It's not for seniors, although seniors may be here. It's for adults with autism. A lot of people mistake that, and it's not going to be for just seniors. Project summary: we have 13 acres fronting Deerfield Parkway. This is an easy one. I just have to point. It's right next door. The site is part of the Route 9 Overlay District. The site has an existing spring, which will be protected. The site has 24 specimen trees, 3 will be removed, and 22 will be protected. 2 of the 22 will have a roadway encroachment within the drip line, but do not justify removal. We propose to develop a campus of up to 72 assisted living units for adults with autism with a separate 23,000 square foot vocational training center. We're also requesting rezone from O1 to C1 and to obtain a use permit with concurrent variances, including all landscaping. Well, I think that was going to be articulated by Pete earlier. All landscaping will be per ordinance, and we are working with a landscape architect. Again, you can see the site is located literally right next door to where we're at right now, fronting on Deerfield Parkway. It's no secret, it's a beautiful streetscape. We want to be respectful of that. This is approximately where the entrance will line up with the Verizon entrance directly across the street. And again, this is about where the access and entrance will be for the site. Site plan, you can see to the north and east, top of the plan is where the watercolors portion of this will be. That's the residential component. 3-story building. The site does slope down, so in the back, you'll have a 4-story elevation. Excuse me. We've intentionally articulated the entranceway and separated the two uses to provide a sense of home for the residents, but segregate and keep the school or vocational aspect of this separate, because it would be more of a daily use as opposed to evening use. In other words, the watercolors component would be used 24/7, whereas the transition component, the vocational center, would be open during the week only, and only until about 6 o'clock in the evening. You'll note that, again, the entrance is articulated at the entrance with the entrance for Verizon. We wanted to pull in and have some elements to screen the parking areas. Parking is per ordinance with a tree space every 5 spaces. And as you'll note here, we've got the vocational center to the south portion of the property. You'll see that the roadways go around the building for fire truck emergency vehicle access. In addition to that, our delivery areas are to the back of the property or away from the street. And we've faced our entranceways into the parking areas. The growing group of developmentally disabled children and younger adults will need housing that allows them to live away from their families and still provide medical, therapeutic, and vocational support they need. During the next 15 years, more than 500,000 children with autism-related disorders will become adults. Many will be cared for by aging parents who likely will outlive them. Adults with autism currently have few options for housing apart from their families. Watercolors will offer 8 separate neighborhoods of 6 units each in 3-story towers. Each unit will be a 1-bedroom studio with bathroom and surround a common community area with dining, serving kitchen, and great room, which I'll show you in a moment. Given the lack of design standards for this population, we determined the program requirements that have to be created. We literally had to start from scratch. We organized a group of vested caregivers and professionals to give a diverse perspective of the perceived program requirements. What we heard was ensure safety and security, maximize familiarity, stability, and clarity, minimize sensory overload, allow opportunities for controlling social interaction and privacy, provide adequate choice and independence, foster health and wellness, enhance one's dignity, and ensure durability, ensure accessibility, and support in the community. Our design. We essentially selected a craftsman style of architecture. The purpose was to create something residential in style. I want to point out, ladies and gentlemen, that I did have a discussion with staff this past week. They did express some concern for the colors that we're proposing, that they're not part of the palette. I did take the liberty in that time to put together a rendering that reflects colors that are within the palette, for nothing else, for discussion purposes. But my point is that I recognize that colors are an issue. We're not asking for a variance for that. We will work within the guidelines, assuming there aren't any comments on the design itself. There will be a standing seam coated metal roof, zinc-coated roof. The brick will be medium beige. We recognize we'll have to bring some samples in here at some point, which we will do. We plan to use hardy board shingle siding, although with the change in color palettes, we're now exploring another material, which I'll explain in a moment. And then aluminum-clad windows will be white. This is the color palette that we worked with that is within the ordinance. What we're proposing here is stucco with a stipple finish. The standing seam roof would be the same. We would still stay with the brown beige brick, and the main portion of the building would have stone. We intentionally did each tower, and the purpose of that was to do each tower so that it had a sense of, sort of created the eclectic environment You didn't have the monotony of any one material. The hardy board shingle siding would be removed, although it could be used, but we are now considering stucco with a stipple finish as an option. And then again, the aluminum clad windows, which by the way would be done in a, I use the color mint green, but the green that's articulated here is an approved color within the palette. There would be, currently there would be 3 towers. The main entrance would be where Tower A is reflected. There'll be 2 floors above that that will be residential, and then the main entrance, which will have reception area, administration, living room areas, a dining room, and essentially a reception. And then you would lead into the various neighborhoods. Each neighborhood would be as the main entranceway with the covered entrance, and you can see we've got the administration, the reception, all the improvements that one would expect for this kind of community, and would include a little shop where they can buy some of the the common conveniences that one would need, like toothpaste and so forth.
Sir? I don't know if you want us to hold your questions to the end, or what would you prefer?
This is your show. You can do it.
Wow. This is I think this is simple. You got to the point, if you could go back to the floor plan, the general floor plan.
I'd be happy to.
That one right there.
There you go.
We have that plan in front of us as well. The plan on the site differs.
It's the same mass. It is slightly different. We're adjusting our site plan to accommodate this footprint.
So the intent is that this is no longer the floor plan?
No, this is the floor plan. The site plan, there's some articulation of the footprint on the site plan that's slightly different.
Well,
What we're
it's
seeing
considerably
here is
different.
there's a second phase that would be the back portion that's sort of flat, sort of faded. Okay?
Well, just to clarify, right now on this plan, at the central part of the axe, you've got your vertical circulation. And in this plan, Tower D looks like it's sucked back into the building so that the vertical circulation that's now shown at the cross of the two, or, the center of the axe, is all encompassed. So which is the
To answer your questions, the plan that you see before you, the plan that has the floor plan, is the plan.
The site plan is the plan.
So the engineer did not have a current footprint. There has been some change to the footprint, but he did not have the footprint when the site plan was prepared. So the site plan, while the entrance and the towers are in approximately the same location, and there is some change in the articulation of the footprint you see here on the screen is the footprint.
Okay, thank you,
Is
sir.
the out-to-out dimension between the pods that are on the street side, I'm not sure which pods those are. I guess the east and west pods or north and south pods, are the out-to-out dimensions the same as what we're looking at on?
They're approximately the same.
Approximately the same.
To answer, I think what your question is the distance from the road going to be the same? And the answer is yes.
We may be looking at a little bit of a distorted image too, because what it looks like is that things are just stretched because there's an aspect ratio problem on our screens.
Looks a little long. I mean,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
stretched on the screen.
Oh, it does?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
It
Well,
looks- it looks wider
it's
than
still a
what's
good
on-
call. I mean, candidly, I'm impressed that you picked it up. There is a small change in the footprint, but the overall massing and sizing and so forth are exactly the same. It's just a little bit of there's less massing within the core, which is what you're picking up on.
Okay. All right. We just wanted to know which was which.
No, that's a good call.
Thank you, sir. I didn't
I don't
mean
know
to-
what you're looking at on the screen, so.
They should be looking at the same thing you are.
The screen is, we're just, the difference lies here. That plan.
No question, that footprint
differs.
shows a larger core in the center. and
Right,
as you
right,
pointed
and
out,
doesn't show building D.
That's proposed.
Right. Just want to make sure we're looking at the same thing.
Building A is pushed in.
Right.
Typical neighborhood would be, as reflected on the screen, would be 6 units in each neighborhood. Each neighborhood would have a kitchen area, more of a serving kitchen, a living room area, great room, if you will, a dining area, common dining area, and a laundry room. Each studio would, of course, have its own washroom. They may or may not have a refrigerator or a microwave, depending on their need. and they would have a desk area. Each unit, each studio is approximately 340 square feet. On the transition side, on the vocational center side, after the age of 21, all publicly offered educational services end for children with autism. Transitions will provide day programs and vocational training for adults based on ability and need. This will not be daycare and only available to those who seek occupational, psychological, and educational advancement. The proposed building will be 23,000 square feet in 2 stories and utilize sustainable materials and technology. Some portion of the campus will include an area for planting a small organic garden. Services to be offered will be a computer lab, life skill training to foster independence, occupational workshops to train candidates in job proficiencies based on ability and aptitude, horticultural training with greenhouse and community garden, which would be hence the reason for the organic garden. Indoor pool for therapeutic and recreational use, men's and women's locker rooms with showers, exercise room with aerobic and weight training equipment, lunchroom, service kitchen for preparation of daily meal and training purposes, job placement services, and a gift shop. Again, the architectural vernacular is the Craftsman style. Again, the same roof material is proposed. The face brick would be, again, the medium beige brown tone. The casement windows would be chocolate brown. Again, the colors that are selected for this rendering are within the color palette for the ordinance. The fascia soffit and trim would match the windows, and again, we would use the stucco stipple finish. This is the footprint for the building. You'll see that it has a small gymnasium, a small pool, locker rooms, lunchroom, classrooms. There'll be a sensory room, which is a place for folks who will be using this to decompress, if you will. There'll be an outdoor dining garden, and frankly, this is designed intentionally to allow some adjustment. We'll have an arts and crafts room, a music room. There will be administration and a staff lounge.
Excuse me.
Yes.
Is the vocational school just for the residents?
No.
So you can come in from the outside?
That's correct.
Just
In
go to
fact,
school there?
That's a good question. In fact, your question is perfect because I just finished my presentation. To answer your question, the residential and the vocational are separate. The folks that live at the residential will use the amenities at the vocational center because it will offer both recreational and educational opportunities. However, there will be day programs that will be available to anyone really who wants to come to this with autism. You don't have to be residents, and answer your question, to utilize the vocational component.
And what grade levels?
It'll be adults, so they have to be 22 years or older. That's not to say we won't take an 18 or a 19-year-old. It's just that the services end, the programs end at the age of 22 for children or adults with autism, and there's no other services available. So this will take it beyond that. We anticipate that the average time spent here with what I define as an outside user and non-resident would be approximately 2 years. The purpose is to allow the folks to use this to become independent, perhaps find job opportunities for them. That's one thing we like about Milton and the Alpharetta area. It's wrought with wonderful job opportunities.
That's the entrance.
Maybe off the sub, is it, are you going to grant degrees or?
No.
It's just vocational?
It could be as simple as teaching somebody to tie their shoes and make their bed, all the way up to
Right now, this side is just another one
someone
of
with
these.
tremendous
This whole thing, that whole
computer
all
skills.
along.
Yeah.
Autism is a spectrum
picked up on
disorder,
that
so
for sure.
we're going to deal with moderate to high functioning. Therefore, they're going to have varying needs. But it's remarkable how a lot of this population is underserved. Many of these individuals are extremely intelligent and very good workers. And I can go on and on and on. And we want to provide a venue for them. And having this campus, we believe, will provide that. We're the first of its kind in the country that we're aware of. Yes, sir.
How do you deal with food service?
Pardon me?
How do you deal with food service?
We're working through that now. We'll either have food service on campus, that's our preference, because the farther you have to bring food, the less
Sure.
the quality is. However, for the vocational center, we may have food service, depends on how that works out. The kitchen for the watercolors will be at a lower level, which is hence where, if you looked at the site plan, you'll see the area, the delivery area in the back. The kitchen will be on the lower level, below the first floor.
That was the one thing that I was just kind of not, so essentially, these areas that are in the common areas between the, I guess you're using the word communities or whatever, is this just a pure serving area?
That's
right?
all it is. It's a serving kitchen.
And people eat communally?
Right. Or if they desire, they can eat in their rooms. It's entirely up to them.
Right.
The food is prepared. The plan
But
is
it's prepared on site, it's not like you're going to bring it in with a...
No.
Okay.
One of the pressure points that we've had in the community in the past has been greenhouses. Could you talk a little bit about the greenhouse structures that you'd be proposing?
Just
sorry, sir, I'm having
just
a
that
hard time.
word, greenhouse, has a certain connotation in this community. We had some bad experiences.
Culturally appropriate glass structure.
They would be glass, they wouldn't be this green covered.
It wouldn't be a white plastic Quonset hut.
No, it's not.
No, it's not. I can assure you it's not.
It's a conservatory.
It's going to be a commercial greenhouse, and I don't want to use the word commercial, but I mean,
Yeah.
from a structural standpoint, it's going to be a solid structure. It has to
Don't
be.
say industrial.
Is there an appropriate politically correct term that I should use for greenhouse?
It's just that what we've had foisted on the city in the past is PVC structures draped in plastic that are, that's what we're not looking
When I
for.
was a kid, I had a fort like that. It didn't last very long. So.
They don't here either.
Where's your detention area on the site plan?
To advise that the detention is provided off-site.
It's the lake.
It's the lake.
Okay.
So all you'll have is water quality issues that you'll have to deal with then probably on this one.
Well, yes.
Yeah.
But you see from the site plan, we're preserving a considerable amount of the green space.
It has quite a bit of topography on it.
Yes, it does.
So it will be interesting to see how well it does actually end up grading out. But
Mr. Chairman, I'm still a little in a conundrum here with the site plan, because this new thing here also shows that we essentially have what looks like a lobby function through one entrance, through the porte cochere, right? But it looks like, the way it's set up on the site plan is like that. So does the porte cochere face towards the entrance, or does the porte cochere face away from the entrance? Because what we have on the site plan is, you have that triangulated sort of a roundabout that saves those 24-inch oaks. And then you have what used to look like sort of a drive-through area, which I would call the porte cochere. And that faces, on a compass direction, what looks to be,
Could be like this.
looks like it faces
Yeah.
west, southwest. But on this, it looks like if north is up, then it would face exactly the opposite direction. So what's the orientation?
I'll tell you what, I just found out we have a laser pointer on here. This area, can you see this?
no, we can't see the laser.
What good is this laser pointer? Can I come up to
Sure.
point to
Yeah.
it?
Unless you have a gun. See what I'm saying?
Now, that element there is
That
this element there.
So it looks like this.
That's what it does, yes.
Okay, that makes more sense.
And you can see this element, but you remove some of the elements that are in here, this actually pushes forward just a little bit, doesn't get any closer. I'm meeting with the engineer tomorrow.
Did everybody see that, what he
Yeah.
just showed us?
Yeah.
So essentially,
Switches.
the plan is flipped from what it shows, and so the orientation is what we have in the site plan. It's just that this plan is upside down.
Right.
Okay.
Well, it depends on which way you're looking at it.
Well, if north is north, it's backwards.
Does the
D
same
would
work
be
on
over
that
here.
site plan, or the floor plan?
Yeah, it's on the backside.
No.
Yeah, that's, you know what, but it should. That would help quite a bit. And if it were to say north, or to reflect that, it would be this way. North would be
Okay,
this way.
that makes sense.
Okay?
Rick, what about the parking? Are you asking for a variance, or do you meet the parking requirements?
Well, it's a good question. The answer is we believe we do meet the parking requirements. None of our population is rushed. We'll have a shuttle bus, we will have visitors, and we will have staff. We think we need more, we know we need more than meet the requirements.
I'm just asking because, the more green space, of course, the better. So if there's,
If we can cut back.
if it could be a request that you could make, of course, to City Council along with your rezoning request, and then you would just have to show, I don't know if it would be supported by staff, but you would have to show that you need.
I want to be careful about that because the vocational center is so new. I would be really concerned if we didn't have enough parking. We had to come back and say, okay, we've got to expand it. But I agree with you. I don't want to put in a sea of asphalt if we can avoid that.
Well, sometimes, they can condition it, if it's zoned and approved, that you don't have to build that parking, but the land has to be set aside, and if the parking shortage exists, then they can require that parking to be built. That's just something, for you to think about and present to them.
That's great.
It wouldn't mean by not building the parking that you have room to expand to put a bigger building. It would just mean that land can be set aside and then built upon if additional parking is required, if they find room.
I think that's right.
The proposed zoning on this is to take all the land to C1.
Correct, yes.
And that's required because of the school?
It could have
Because
gone
couldn't
either
you
way.
have a conditional in
It was,
O&I also? For school?
No matter, it's very strange. The ordinance requires a school to always have a special use permit, so it doesn't
Regardless.
matter.
Yeah.
Why
I
didn't
think
you
we
just
chose
determine to
C1.
segregate the site into multiple? Why don't you just drop a property line down the middle?
Because it would make it more difficult. Then you'd have to create landscape strips between the two properties. It just makes the zoning.
This is the only commercial zoning that touches Deerfield along that side, though, isn't it? Or is the
Portions of this
Well,
development is
the
C1,
corner
I
gas
believe,
station,
too.
I guess, and
I think the way we chose C1, I guess, because that was what the majority of the existing zoning was. Also,
it
there's...
just has less, allows potentially higher uses than.
Well, it would all be
I-
conditioned to
yeah.
it. It would all be
I mean, it
conditioned
becomes
to
it would be
this.
conditioned just to this use.
Exactly,
yes,
to the
Okay.
square footage and use.
Okay.
I guess,
Again, that's beyond our purview. I'm just
no,
trying to
I
get
know. I guess the only
understanding of-
other, I don't know necessarily if it's an advantage or not, but when you have the C1 against C1, you have like a 5-foot landscape strip, but obviously they're providing tons of buffer and they
Yeah.
could meet, when you go to O&I, you have a little bit more of the landscape strips, but I think it was just a matter of, okay, the majority of the property was C1, we'll just go and switch everything to C1. So, I mean, that was, but yeah, you wouldn't want to split it because then you'd have to create all these landscape strips and get variances, and you just would want to keep it all together.
Then I think one of our comments would be that, that the green space that they show on the site plan remain as it goes forward to the city council. And even with the building changes, they have 2 specimens that are shown right in the front of the building. So any changes that are made to the plan, that those should remain. The specimen trees that they're showing to be incorporated into the site plan.
One area that we haven't discussed is the variance request for the percentages of the materials on the buildings themselves.
That's the next one they're going to cut down.
And that's the crux of what we're here for tonight, I guess, really, is to discuss that a little bit more.
Did you finish your presentation?
I did, thank you.
Okay.
We have feedback. We're just going to speak specifically to the rezone now. Is that what we're doing?
I think we're on the building.
I think they
You
got
said you took these out of order.
I think they kind of blended.
Yeah.
I don't know that
Do you want to go ahead and deal with any comments relative to the rezoning?
Yeah.
Set that aside.
I think that's the easy piece. Let's do that first and
Yeah.
talk about that, then we're going to zoning, which I think is what she's talking about doing anyway. I mean, from an aesthetic standpoint, from the rezone, I think it's a kind of a pretty straightforward deal. I mean, it's beyond our purview, really, but
I would just restate the comment about the green space remain as shown, and when they change it around, keep the specimen trees they're showing now.
I have a question about the location of the dumpsters in the assisted living building. So they're actually situated where the additional building will eventually take place.
That's correct.
Is that right?
Lobby screen. Initially, we had the design flip, so it was towards the streets, and we were advised by staff, if we could flip that, which is an easy thing to do, you can easily screen that. Even if we didn't build the second phase, it would be easier to screen that area. So we flipped it.
Are they going to be a large compactor, a system, or is it going to be a collection of dumpsters or behind the screening? Or? Okay, just curious.
Usually how I do my projects, more efficient. Plus, for whatever reason, people like to play with them. So.
Angela? I guess the only thing that I would have a fear about this is that once it's commercially zoned, it's commercially zoned forever.
Right.
So if this use is successful, and whatever, and they keep this building stays around for 10 years or 15 years or whatever, and some new user comes in, then this whole thing could be scraped. What provisions exist to be able to keep a use in place and keep this from becoming, the next big box
Well, typically
for the next user?
Typically, it's conditioned specifically to a site plan and a specific use.
Right, yeah, I mean, if you're not comfortable with just the general C1 use, staff can condition it to this. It is assisted living facility by definition, so we can say that. And it just happens to be that assisted living is allowed by right in C1, and you don't need a use permit for it. Because let's say if it was O&I or R6 or apartments, we would need a use permit on top of it. So staff would be very comfortable if the applicant is comfortable with not just conditioning to the square footage and the height, but as well as to the use itself. So that somebody could come and scrape it off, but then they'd have to come in for a new rezoning if they wanted to do anything other than this use.
Well, with that caveat, I feel pretty comfortable with this. The only thing I'm worried about is just the camel getting his nose in the tent.
Yeah.
This dark bid box along the full can and then transition on over to city limit. And it's always been the traditional approach of the director of the department that if you wanted to do a zoning modification to a particular zoning, that you would have to come in and demonstrate to the director that you weren't really playing around terribly with your use condition, which Fulton County had been condition 1A, and that you weren't playing around with heights and with densities. And so it'd be totally within the purview of the director as to whether or not to allow you to move forward with a zoning modification. And if the feeling was this is much too aggressive, you're really coming in here something that's a new palette, you've got to go through a rezoning. We're not going to allow people to accept a zoning modification application.
I was on another planning commission for 11 years, and I was there long enough to be able to make decisions and then watch them blow up in my face. So I just wanted to make sure that we don't have the same thing happen here.
I mean, it could be done either way. I mean, we're very conservative, so
okay, well, with
our zoning,
with those
we're very
understandings,
narrow,
I have no
we're
problem with
very
zoning.
dogmatic. So
No problems.
I mean, from a use standpoint, I think it's a good use for the property as currently planned.
Agreed. Yeah.
Looks like a beautiful project.
I think the use is great, and I think the use is wonderful in an overview for the city. Sure. I think it's a tremendous asset.
So, I don't think as a courtesy review from that standpoint, from the zoning standpoint, I don't think we have any issues with regards to the use or the requirements.
well, you talk about the variance because that'll be a concern of the planning commission. What your opinion is on the variance to the materials?
Well, that's the next
discussion.
discussion that we will have.
Just to start off with a baseline, how much of a deviation is it from the existing standards?
I think it was in the letter here.
It's in the letter. The percentages, is it 40, 60?
Somewhere I saw that.
Yeah, it's actually on the main site plan. It's,
There it is, yeah.
the engineer put it on there. So, exterior wall materials of all non-residential buildings and townhomes, blah, 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 consist of a minimum of 40% in lieu of 75% per vertical wall plane of the following brick or natural stone. So it's going from 75 to 40 on the brick and stone, and going to a maximum of 60% of the other materials in lieu of the 25% required. And I think that Mr. Swanson had done all the calculations as far as your percentages of the different materials.
Having just sat on a committee for the Highway 9 Overlay District, and them trying to develop some additional design guidelines relative to the Highway 9 Overlay District. From the community standpoint, there was pretty much a groundswell that the percentages of brick to other use materials on the buildings should be maintained. There was a real strong desire within the community to have the majority of the buildings being either brick or natural stone in the Highway 9 Overlay District. So my opinion would be, from my personal opinion at this point right now, is that they should meet the percentages stipulated within the overlay district.
What about the new Deerfield standards that do not have percentages that we're
They
looking
haven't
at?
been passed yet or discussed to a major extent.
No, they haven't been passed, but the intent is to adopt
But
them.
that was for commercial more so than residential. And this is a residential project.
Yeah, we haven't dealt with that. It was just all buildings.
Yeah, I know.
Well,
Mr.
what we
Chairman?
have in place now, I don't think that there should be a hardship variance from the requirements.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
This is probably going to be pretty unpopular on this body, but I like their original design better than what they came up with to meet that standard. I think that some of the colors start to make this thing look kind of Moorish to me. You know, it's very white stucco and stuff. It starts to lose its craftsmanship character. I like the colors that bring up kind of a wayfinding for let people know where to live. I understand that the intent of this thing is, and maybe 40% is a pretty substantial reduction from 75, but I like the water table. I think that it is appropriate for a multi-tiered facade like this to have some sort of a tripartite elevation where you basically have roof, wall, and some sort of a water table. And so I think that there probably could be a place where you could go less. Maybe 40% is too little. Maybe you had some of these other vertical elements where they take the stone all the way up to the eave line or something in a couple of these other locations. And the water table is pretty rigid in that it just, it's straight all the way around. So maybe there's a way to be able to get a modification between the two. But I think that trying to imagine these things completely covered in brick or 3 or 4 stories high starts to feel a little oppressive to me. And so I think that there is an opportunity, to have a lighter material at some portion of it to be able to break up the mass and to
Are those townhomes
to
across the
make it
street?
feel a little lighter, I guess is my comment.
Are
So,
those-
I'm sorry.
Are the townhomes across the street that are brick 3 stories?
No, those are 2.
Are they 2?
Yeah.
The townhomes across the street are a different architectural vernacular.
Oh, I know that.
Yeah. And by the way, I agree with your comment about the colors are more appropriate for this style of architecture. I'd feel a little, I think your comment about the Moorish kind of feel is appropriate, although that is still a material and a design material that is used in the Craftsman style. If you're comparing one to the other, I can see your point. But I wanted to be proactive and show how we could address that following the underlying
pallet out there a lot.
The other thing I think that you've done well here, which I kind of like, is the idea that these links are neutral. The intent is to try and make them vanish. So whatever the color is that you use on that, it recedes and you pop the units. That makes sense pretty well too. And I don't know if that was an intent for purposes of the rendering to highlight the modules, but I think that works pretty well to be able to create.
Hardline, I mean, they're set back quite a bit. They don't, if you look at this from a bird's eye view, which we would do in future presentations, you'll see that they're articulated very separately, and it's intentional that these elements are nondescript so that they don't overtake upstage the towers themselves. I don't even like using the word towers instead of greenhouses.
They're only 3 stories high, so it's not. So I guess what we have is a little bit of a conundrum here as a body that, first of all, are we feeling pretty strong that it should be 75% of the wall surface should be brick or stone?
Well, I mean, that's the current zoning requirement. As Robin alluded to, there are some movements in effect with regards to, because the covenants of Deerfield are fairly distinct, as we've dealt with in the past. Some of the requirements of buildings that are in Deerfield are different than the balance of Highway 9. There is a movement for council to then adopt Deerfield's covenants with minor tweaks to a subset of the overlay for Deerfield itself, which may allow other materials and potentially different ratios. For example, right now, the only materials are brick and stone in the Highway 9 overlay. Under the new potential zoning that's coming in would allow for precast and other materials at different ratios.
Yeah. But I think part of the other thing that I think is influential to me is the idea that while this lies within the Highway 9 overlay, it is never perceived from Highway 9, ever. It's not possible to perceive this from Highway 9. And so essentially it ties into more closely what would be ever the standard for Deerfield, because it is only ever perceived from this roadway. And so it seems like there is a reasonableness to the idea that you would connect more closely with the things that are across the street and down this parkway rather than things that are happening over the back fence. If that
I concur.
There's no style requirement in the Highway 9 overlay?
No.
Or variations, I guess, in so many.
I guess I would say that, maybe 40 is a little low. I don't know what optimal is. 75 may be too much, but.
See, I can see that even looking at these elevations for purposes of discussion, that you've got, and I'm looking at the one that's on the screen right now. So if you're looking at the front elevation on the green element, and you were to drag the masonry up that center pop-out,
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
that's enough for me. I mean, I realize that's more masonry that is in there now, and even if you were to bring the water table down a little bit to be able to moderate that, breaking up the facade in that way.
Yeah.
Going up to the next story.
Yeah.
Or just taking it up to the
All the way up
eaves.
to the
Yeah.
eaves.
Even if the water table comes down a little bit to be able
But
to accommodate
keep
that,
the table across the
is
whole
is
Add this.
I think that makes a much stronger design.
Yeah.
Actually, if I understand you correctly, we're talking about the green tower. at this
Yes.
point. The center appendage was gable.
Right.
All the way up.
If you brought that all the way up to, say, the sill of the third-story windows,
Or just to the eaves.
or to these. Either way, either way, at that point, I would just run it all the way up into the gable.
Yeah, it's easier to detail that way.
Right. But you're right, we could do that. That could work. I mean, and that would actually bring the ratios up considerably.
But I don't think what I'm talking about is the idea, and I'm talking about bringing it up in individual areas like that, because just to take and throw a whole bunch of more stone on it is just going to look ridiculous, and it's going to start to become oppressively heavy looking, I think.
Well, then we're going in an entirely different direction. I
Right.
would never do this style of architecture with all that masonry.
Right.
It just wouldn't be appropriate.
Right, I agree with that.
But I do like your idea about keeping the colors, because the whole concept of watercolors and wayfinding and so forth,
Are there, I don't know the overlay as well as Terry does, so I don't know if there's other colors that you could use that would allow you the same kind of wayfinding capabilities. So I think, I realize you're starting to tape towards primary colors.
Beige and more beige. Yeah.
Yeah, so-
Unfortunately, those colors were picked for one specific area, and they've proliferated across all of the ordinances in a rush to get the ordinances in place. That whole color palette really needs to be reviewed on a more overlay by overlay and district by district viewpoint, in my opinion. It's work that staff can eventually get to maybe at some point in time, but
Add that to our list.
we just add that to the list. But
Yeah.
in general, with the character of the buildings that you're trying to do, some of the cognitive issues that you're talking about with your constituents, the people that are going to be living there, I can see some benefits to actually having those materials that are a little more richer in color. And
Yeah, it's just wayfinding stuff. It's like,
Yeah.
I live in the red one.
Yeah.
I live in the green one,
Now, again, autistic people aren't necessarily challenged mentally
No.
from that standpoint.
Right.
They have other issues that.
Actually, there are certain colors that
Yeah.
that work best for adults or children with autism. It's usually muted colors, bright fluorescent colors.
Yeah,
very sharp
excite.
colors can overstimulate is a good word.
Yeah.
It needs to be soft and it needs to be appropriate. And these renderings really don't do the colors justice. If you actually look at the cabinet stains that we selected, they're deeper than this. It's very hard to capture that in the rendering.
Yeah.
Do we need a vote out of this?
No,
No, this is a courtesy review.
Yeah.
Again, I think I'd echo what James said, that, maybe we try to get a little more of the masonry up the buildings a little more, get a little closer to the 75%.
And not the stucco on the
And
community center.
yeah, and then,
I think I'm actually less fixated on a percentage than I am about just breaking
Yeah.
up the facades with
Yeah.
different kinds of materials.
Well, I was more concerned when I read the ordinance that we were designing to a mathematical equation as opposed to an aesthetic.
Right.
Right. And I hear what you're saying, and the good news is that I can do what you're asking me to do, somewhere above 40 and less than 70 or 75, and still maintain the integrity of the design.
sure.
I don't know what that number is yet, but I understand what you're saying, and I would be willing to do that. I think some of the comments made actually would increase that significantly.
And again, I'd at least bring in some design of what the greenhouse is going to be.
If you're serious about a
A
glass
manufacturer's
greenhouse
cut or
structure, I think that would be
something.
very well received.
Yeah, no, believe me, I understand, and we're on the same page as far as that's concerned. It doesn't do us any good to do a PVC and vinyl cloth greenhouse. I'll bring materials with me, actual samples of storyboards next time I come in. To be more specific. I'll also have renderings of the building, artist renderings.
Larry, is there any comment we can make that, that suggests reconsidering the colors rather than making them a bland color?
Well, Bill gives us comments that he's made about that they need to be relooked at.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
And I think you also have the comment that we thought that the existing colors were not totally objectionable,
Okay.
Like they're actually kind of nice.
The problem with that is if you like those colors more, we're going to have to add another variance to allow those colors because they're not in the palette. You're kind of in
So
a...
that's not one of the variances there.
No, it's not, but I was just talking to Mr. Hendricks. I mean, I believe there's enough time to add, but at the same time, the council doesn't like a lot of variances, and we're just kind of in a spot. I mean, we can change the percentage. I don't think that's a big deal, but as far as adding a whole nother request.
Do we have another review of this before they go to ask
No.
for
Well, I
variance?
guess Not it's for up the to the variance.
Not for
applicant
variance?
if he wants to
Council.
pursue.
And you'll see this.
I just, it would be nice to have seen the
That's
colors
right.
you've chose, you know, the alternate colors you chose that aren't on the slide right now. I really don't know.
It's pretty
what it
much
should-
the red, the green, the blue. It's
No,
anything that's
no,
not
it's-
beige.
So that would be your,
No, this is the one that's the,
No, well, we're,
it's that color, it's the beige.
We don't want the
and-
white on there.
I could also do it in an off-white shingle as opposed to the stucco, but again, it goes back to sort of the wayfinding aspect of this.
Well, that would be up to you if you want to pursue a variance.
I think one of the things that works really well is that with the dark background color and you pop the white trim around the windows, I think that actually adds a little bit more detail. It's nicer.
I agree.
When you go back to the white wall and you lose the trim and you go to plaster, it looks almost sterile. I mean, it's very modern. You start losing that kind of a connection to the residential, vernacular around here, and it starts looking like, an adobe house.
institutional building.
Reach is required. I absolutely agree with that.
well, I guess my question was, you have all these multi-colors here, and then you just show the white one. What's the plan to make them all?
Oh, that's a good question. What I did is, when I spoke with staff the other day, they pointed out that there's an issue with the colors that were proposed. They're not part of the Route 9 overlay district color palette. And we jokingly talked about it, and the colors are beige, medium beige, and dark beige. And we felt that, okay, fine. So I thought, I didn't want to give the impression I wasn't listening. We explored an alternative. And that center piece, if you take the red building in the center, I took the red building in the center and basically converted that to the white stucco. That's all I did. And by the way, I'm suggesting in that one photo that you saw, that one rendering, is that the whole building would be that.
All
That same color. And frankly, I
Yeah,
think
well-
that starts to look a little monotonous.
Yeah.
But that would be true if it were brick, or if it were stone, or anything else. So it was intentional to bring in different colors, and it's appropriate for this craftsman style of architecture. If you look at some of the southern craftsman style, they are colors. These are the colors that are used. Without question, my preference would be to leave the colors as are, with the stipulation that we would increase the amount of masonry in some of the areas that we talked about.
I think what we're talking about is it's up to the applicant whether they want to go for another variance request.
Right.
I think what they've heard from us is that we would be favorably disposed to the colors that they originally presented. It's up to them to be able to pursue them or not.
I hear that loud and clear.
I mean, we can't ask them to create another variance request.
Yeah, but looking at the table of permitted colors for the Highway 9 overlay, the building exterior walls are browns, beiges, and tans, reds or red browns, and they're all basically muted colors. There are accent colors that are allowed, but that's only for decorative elements.
Right.
Okay.
Trim pieces and fascia.
Exactly,
Lines that we've
yes.
looked at.
Yes.
Right, it's very specific. It limits you in terms of a very, very specific field. And because this is residential, you're forced to go with an architectural design vocabulary that would be appropriate for an all brick structure. An all beige brick structure. What I want to hear, though, and I think I'm hearing, is that if we were to pursue that as part of our variance, the design review board would be supportive, without getting too strong a word, of that direction. Because if you're not going to be supportive, there's no point in even trying.
I think everybody said that they
I would
were.
be supportive.
I don't have anything else.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, I appreciate this.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Good luck to you. See this before.
Yes, many times. Next item on the agenda is courtesy review for the landscape group at 13120 Arnold Mill Road.
Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen of the board, my name is David Murray. I reside at 10675 Street Road, Roswell, Georgia. I know this piece of property has been before this board, I think in the past. I don't know that all of you that have seen the decision or present at those meetings. I was not myself as representative of the project. It's a 1.7 acre tract on Arnold Mill Road. It's an operating landscape company. The gentleman that bought this property bought it from a pre-existing building, business use. The buildings were built on the property before he bought the property. They were permitted by Fulton County, not by the city of Milton. The buffers that were on the project were not enforced by Fulton County. He unknowingly bought the property intending to use his business as a replacement use onto the property. And as he applied for his business license with the city of Milton, it came to light that the buildings that were built did not comply with the buffers, and therefore we're asking for a use permit under AG1 for a landscape company to operate on AG1 land, as well as buffer reductions. And we've tried to minimize those by reducing some of the impervious surfaces that were existing on the property, by reducing the driveway onto Arnold Mill, and applying for a DOT curb cut to improve the remaining curb cut to DOT standards. I'm not going to spend a lot of time trying to explain to you the nuances of how we got to where we are tonight, but I'd rather have the staff that's present ask us questions, and maybe we can answer those to the best of our ability. To have Lisa Schipple, Rollator and Schipple attorney with us. We have the owner-operator of the landscape company, as well as the landscape architect, and myself. So if it's okay with you, I think we'd rather address any questions you might have.
So this is for existing, you're not adding anything to the buffer?
I'm going to be adding a dumpster. We have one dumpster on the property right now that's not sufficient. I'm going to be adding a dumpster. I'm going to move the handicap parking space over onto the concrete portion of the parking lot, as opposed to the gravel portion, so that it's better accessible to the building. But I'm not adding any buildings, I'm not expanding the parking lots, I'm reducing the parking lots.
I'm looking at the flood map in the lower left corner, and it appears that the 100-year flood zone does come onto the property. Do you know roughly where that is relative to the existing buildings or anything? It's not really shown on the plan.
The floodplain appears to be contained within the ditch channel. This is in the upper reaches and headwaters of those creek flows. We've done a ground topography. We've certified the elevation on the property. We've actually staked the buffers for the stream flows on the property. This was a very challenging piece of property had it been done correctly, in that there was only 3.5% of the property was buildable when he bought it, although he did not know that. And none of the buildings that were built fell within that box of buildable property.
But it was originally built as residential, though?
The only thing that I know that was built prior to the last business person being there, where there was a shed on the back side of the creek, I think it was probably there for residential use. But the house, I think, was built next, and then the warehouse building, which is next to the creek, was probably built last.
But the last use was a business use when he bought it?
Yes, it was not a landscape business, it was a different type of business.
So it was operating as business?
It was it was not permitted.
Unpermitted.
It was an
Is
illegal business.
It was built under residential AG1.
Yeah.
That's strong.
The The structure closes the street. I believe the tax records show was built in 1950. It was an old single-family residence, and like Mr. Burry said, there was probably that shed way back in the creek. And then I think around 2002, the larger building near the creek was built. We have evidence of a certificate of occupancy, but there's no. They just ran a business and nobody caught them, basically.
Is this an
The
approved
previous
use
owners.
in this zone?
I'm sorry.
Is this an approved use in this zone?
You can apply for a use permit for in AG1. It is a permitted use. I will be for those who were not here on the board last year. This item was before the Design Review Board as well as the City Council. It was denied by the City Council on last October. The zoning ordinance specifies that unless your property the site plan changes significantly, you have to wait a year from the point in time that the council made their decision. This would go to the council in November, so they would meet that qualification. Their intent was to purchase additional property to the north or above them, and that did not work out. So they came back, and this is what they have to show, to present to council and to the Planning Commission.
Was it denied at council because of the neighbors, or did people come out and
Because
speak
of
against it?
No, the council, it was a 6 in favor to deny it, 1 for approving it. Basically, the variances, they were opposed to all the variance requests. I will say that the variance being requested along the northern property line where that's the best place for the entrance, and GDOT is very happy to close the second entrance on the south side of the property. So basically, the variance being requested is within reason for that entrance, because that's the best place for the entrance to be. But the council was not comfortable with the reduction in buffers, those variances. Now, I will say, too, that since that time, Mr. Burry has found more, we've actually added more variances because we have more accurate information.
But they haven't, this plan, though, removes a lot of the parking that they had on the previous
Correct,
plan.
yes. Well, at least the surface concrete that's out there currently,
So the only
yes.
thing that would remain, while you have the dumpster, 3 parking spaces, it looks like, a portion of them, and then the existing building.
Yeah. So they're not expanding the use per se as far as square footage, just like Mr. Burry said, additional dumpster, and then removing the cement that's used for the second entrance that's on the south side. That would all be removed and replanted.
And you found that they had gotten a certificate of occupancy for the big warehouse?
Well, the applicant had supplied it to us, at least a copy of the certificate of occupancy.
This seems to me just one of those deals where you're having this applicant is paying for the sins of the past applicant. So the other option is to essentially make the property unusable in its existing form, or except for a house, right?
Right, well, this is the same applicant who was denied the last
I
time. It's not
understand.
okay.
But they didn't create this problem by building the structure, right?
No, but
didn't
one
do-
would argue they didn't do due diligence to make sure it was an appropriate use and there was enough room.
That it was really, the only allowed use is single-family residential.
I would just like to put onto the record that my client, since he's bought the property, has not added any improvements to exacerbate the issue.
Right, that's true.
When we found out that this was a problem, I wasn't originally involved in it, but as it came to me, the more we found out about the property, we added more stream buffers. The last application drawing missed a stream that took all the whole rear property out of play as far as buildability, because I was going to try to do some buffer averaging and bring it back to you all for your consideration, as well as the Planning Commission and Council. When we found the other stream on the property that wasn't reported, all that was taken by the normal stream buffers that it requires by the city. So it's not like my client intentionally or has willfully put anything on the property to make this worse. What he is agreeable to do has allowed me to remove some of the impervious improvements on the property, and also has agreed to plant all the buffers that are available to buffer standards, including doing buffers that are on both sides of the property where there used to be impervious surfaces.
Well, we would just comment on aesthetics, and this is way over just an aesthetic, question. I guess staff's gonna look at it, is there other businesses, how does it impact surrounding residents? But as far as, the aesthetics of it, I think that's, a great condition if they did approve it, that it be planted to buffer standards.
Is the existing fence remaining?
The fence that moves across behind the building in the front is basically for security. At night, there is equipment parked there's left there overnight, and the fence that moves through that buffer that's perpendicular to the side property lines is intended to remain.
And then the board fence that runs along the backside of the office building remains then too?
That's again for security.
Yeah.
It's a tough situation.
Yeah, it really is. But it's been fun to live with, trying to go through all this rigmarole.
It's been challenging. I want to sympathize with my client. He hasn't done anything other than he's uncovered all these problems with a piece of property that he's invested heavily in for his business, and now he's had to expend lots of money coming, not just to come to you all, but the process has been very long and difficult for him as well.
And I guess also if they approve the variance, which has the parking in it, that it should remain gravel and not be a paved surface. That would be the only other, I guess,
Our
aesthetic.
intentions are not to add any additional
Right.
impervious surface to keep the water quality in the room.
Yeah, I don't know what else we can comment on.
No.
I mean, just,
I don't know why, that's the only location for the dumpster?
We have to put a separate drain line, it's the only place that I have on the property that has parking on it. I'm gonna put a second dumpster in there because the one that they have is not large enough, and when I do that, I've left it in that location because right there right behind that is a place I can put the sumps for the dumpster drain to meet the Fulton County Health Department regs.
One dumpster is not big enough, you said? What
If
is?
he puts a bigger dumpster in, we have a turnaround issue that's gonna come to light. If I use two small ones, it works better, but we really haven't focused on exactly which one. So it's either gonna be a large roll-off, or it's gonna be two individual dumpsters, but they're going to be set on a concrete drain pad.
Yeah, again, the only thing that I do see though is on your firm plan that it does show the 100-year flood line over there near where that dumpster's being located right now. So I don't know.
That's an unstudied elevation. Had the elevation been available, I would have probably already affixed it onto the drawing. And we have those buffers staked on the ground, if any of you would like to visit them and see them, but when you go out and look at the topography, the elevation between that parking lot and down that creek, 12 feet. Where the dumpster sits down to the creek. It's greater than 12 feet. The building that's built back by that creek will not going to flood.
Anyone else we can comment on? Just pickle.
Tough situation.
Yeah, it really is.
I mean, it looks like they're planting the buffer standards where they can plant.
Yeah, I mean, what else can we do? I mean, can't make stuff up.
Around
Any
that
other
existing
comments?
house.
Yeah.
I don't have any.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good luck. Last but not least.
You guys aren't used to these long meetings lately. You're not used to these long meetings lately.
Actually, emailed my wife and I said, this one's going to be longer than normal.
Yeah.
I gotta go home and do a cell project. Doesn't that sound exciting?
You have to.
I have to assist.
Oh, okay.
A seven.
I'd like to call the next item on the agenda, Global Payments Data Center at 12700 Deerfield Parkway.
Ken Bass, representing property, here to speak to that subject.
We're taking over. It is easy. Big moment.
Yes.
I'm here representing Global Payments. My name's Ken Bass. What has been handed to you guys, I presume, are copies of things that you've had previously. We have submitted all of the components except for one of the drawings. The second one in that package is a perspective, and we want to call attention to that one. We'll do it in a second. But our meeting tonight, as I understand it, is to bring forth what our vision has been through the works with the department and the pictures that have been forwarded to us to try to take the building that we had met with earlier and incorporate those features that were forwarded in the local area and to incorporate those features both in color, texture, and glazing as it relates to the building we're looking to come up. So with that, we utilize the color palette and met percentages as they apply in the zoning ordinance. And when it comes to the city council, the wisdom applying those standards to this building. Is there any questions about that or answer? Going further with the presentation.
You want to talk about the building first?
Go for it, whichever way.
Well, I guess it's more of a site plan issue about the location of where, do we have cooling towers?
I'm sorry.
Will there be towers, cooling towers at this data center?
We have ground-mounted towers, yes, and they're behind walls. So
Is it on the side, though?
They're on the side, and they're back behind the loading area. So they're behind two walls, maybe be a better way to explain this.
Why isn't that area on the back of the building?
Serviceability more than anything else for a future expansion at some point. And so we didn't want to put anything in the way of what was coming. Plus, the yard as it stands, the intention is to mirror that yard when the addition takes place.
The addition would be to the rear?
Sir?
The addition would be to the rear or to the right side?
May I show our site plan?
Sure.
current building is here with parking. It may be easier to turn it this way if that's okay. In terms of roadway to the face of the building, all the renderings are oriented facing in this direction. We have all the side yard houses the children here. It is behind 12-foot wall here, 8-foot wall here. The 8-foot that in the rear will be this location as a future day, and then the yard will parallel and then would remain with the same enclosures. There was a concern about the view of this mechanical equipment, and would like to speak to that specifically with this rendering here. This was done as a model. It's a little crude, I know, to bring in here, but we did it specifically to allow the transparency so you can see. This is at the front road, right here, at the elevation of 5 foot 6 inches normal height. So what you would actually see is you see the first wall, which is 8 foot. If there's a 12-foot wall behind it that you don't even see because of your perspective looking up at the building, and the children are behind that. So visually, they're screened from the roadway.
How tall are the chillers?
I don't
Roughly.
mechanically engineer to answer that question. They're typically around 12, 14 feet.
So they'll be taller than the
Taller than the wall.
second wall?
A little bit of the equipment on top of the chiller and the generator would stick above that 8-foot screen wall, but not very much.
So you- but you won't be able to
Generators in
see
there
it.
also?
Yes, sir.
Generators and chillers and fuel tanks.
Are these water cooled or are they air cooled chillers?
I believe they're water.
So we won't have water tanks or anything else to?
No, sir.
Is any of the rooftop, is there any rooftop equipment?
There is nothing on the roof.
Okay, so none of that would be
decorations
visible?
Whatsoever. It is a data center. Don't know how familiar you are with those, but we want to protect it as much as we could. There's no penetrations in the roof whatsoever.
Now, what about your parking? Most data centers don't, they only have, how many employees will you have at one time?
Very limited. In fact, the largest population is during changeover. There's 20 in the command center, and then there's 20 more when they come, and then a few administrative. The max on site is 50, 55 ever, by our calculations. So the parking spaces that we have, I believe, are 100. Is that correct? And that is half or less of what the zoning ordinance requires. So that's the one variance that I know that we have involved in front of the variance board. I don't know if you guys want to speak to that as well.
Well, it seems like if you don't need the parking, and I know that in other places, you know, data centers, they don't have that many employees on site, so you shouldn't have to build that parking, but you could set aside that green space, and if, you know, future parking is needed or found to be required, if the use changes, it may be a data center now, but maybe become an office with more employees.
And we didn't completely ignore additional parking if we had to. We were just trying to preserve all of the green space, and there are some significant trees back here.
Yeah, it could be set aside, not so your building could get larger, but just set aside that green space in case in the future additional parking needs to be constructed.
We didn't talk about the expansion. Is the expansion to the west or to the north on this building?
West, right?
West. Be to the west.
It would be to the west, or it's to the
Okay.
rear.
But it would be good to reduce that, you know, where the parking's going past the building now, if the staff, you know, if you can present to staff that that's all the parking that you need, if that could be reduced, but set aside again, in case they find that there's a parking shortage, or if the use changes, then that parking could be required to be built, you know. Not that if there's no parking there, then that means you can build more building.
I think the concern that we had reached the variance was the lowest number count, I believe, was 3 spaces per 1,000 square feet. And so it was roughly 150 spaces. We're showing 100 at this point. And that was a reason for variance, even
Right.
though it was a good bit more than what we actually needed.
Well, we have in Alpharetta, they just built a 180,000 square foot data center.
Right.
And there's, you know, less than 50 parking spaces, and it hasn't been an issue. And we've done that in the past. There's on the State Farm data center off of Marconi. Never have had an issue. I think they have 10 parking spaces. So it's, but they're always required to set aside land that would be required for parking. So it's not like they're gaining, additional. It's we're gaining green space.
I believe we could set aside an appropriate amount of spaces.
And
Take
that's
care of that.
just one recommendation on the site plan.
The site plan as we currently have it right now shows the equipment yard screen is actually only 8 feet tall, so.
8 foot tall wall
Yeah.
in front of the.
Well, no, on this plan, all the screen walls are just 8 feet. Obviously, we'd want those walls to be at least as tall as the tallest piece of equipment that was in there. And especially with the generators and the noise and the low, not too distant from here is a hotel on that same side of the property. So, we want to try to baffle as much of that noise as we could.
I think if we need to move a wall from 8 foot to 12 foot, we can do that. We can check into the heights of the equipment and work through.
I do know the generators, by the time you put the belly pads, or the pad, the belly tanks, and all the other, they get pretty tall, so.
And they
we
should
just
be.
want to-
Yeah, and landscape screening too, as well as the wall.
Yeah, because the landscape helps deaden the sound.
And we're honoring all the landscape obligations out front. Quite honestly, folks, we would prefer to screen this building and not call any attention to it whatsoever. Given the fact it's a data center, we're here to be area with it.
Well, that's why I'd almost like to see that whole first row tray of parking go away. Just let that be landscape,
Additional
green,
landscaping.
and,
About the first row being the front row. so-
yeah.
I think that would be very good, because most of
The
the
first
data centers have a good
section.
buffer.
They would have to change their requests.
They're not right now, they've gone for a staff variance of 20%.
Well, no, I mean, they chose their count, but we just said that, it's just the way our parking ratios, we don't really have a ratio for data centers, which obviously isn't fair, but it is, I mean, we just don't have it right now, so that, and I'm not sure if we have a way to do what Ms. Cook was suggesting of setting aside land. When we do the LDP, they're going to have to meet the requirements. And so, but if they want to reduce further their parking, they can do that.
Yeah, those are, that's always a council condition. I thought they had to go to city council, where they, the parking doesn't have to be built, but it can be set aside.
Yeah, we just haven't had that before, actually. And I mean, it's a great idea. It's just, our parking section is just kind of a little crazy.
Yeah, that's how ours is, so
Right.
that's why it always has to go to city council. And that's usually for, for data centers, because they're unique. And we just usually, that's the condition that's recommended. But what Terry was talking about too, we usually say that screening walls around the cooling equipment are designed to prevent the transmission of either high-pitched or low-level sounds generated by any equipment at the location, so it doesn't extend beyond the property limits, because we've had a lot of complaints from residential about the low sound that's coming from data centers, so that's
We have
something.
them wrapped on all 3 sides currently for that reason, to help protect the sound.
Will it though, so it won't be projected off to the residential areas? I guess the closest one.
Well, there is no residential unless it's there's no residential.
There isn't, okay.
It's just the hotel
Hotel's
and then
the closest.
Walmart's back
Yeah.
loading area.
So these and the townhomes are far enough away, I guess.
They're on the other side of the building at least, too, so. The north elevation, it appears like we ran out of money. Why don't we have parapets and
The roof just free falls off the edge.
Roof free falls off the edge.
You put it in a gutter, and first of all, I'm not sure I totally understand from what I'm looking at. Is this a tilt building? And yet there are no expansion joints or joints to any of the brickwork. and a lot of those other things. So the intent really on that north side is that you're just going to have a gutter system that just goes across the edge of that roof, falls into a downspout, and that's the entire roof edge?
That's correct. And the reason why is to protect the equipment on the interior. Once we start building parapet walls, getting into roof drains, scuppers, those kind of things, it just opens up the potential to have water issues over time. Once again, we're trying to protect the data center as best we could and have a seamless transition straight over the edge.
Okay.
My concern is actually that as you're coming south on Deerfield
You can see
Parkway,
right
you're
straight
going to
in
see
there.
right into that.
Yeah.
So it needs to be
So
a
it-
complete design.
And
There's
then you'll see the TPO white roof and all the other things.
The other thing that
associated with it.
Terry, I'm also struggling with is that there are some details on these elevations that are impossible to accomplish. You have for example, you've got an extraordinarily thin roof structure over the entry module with zero slope. So that can't possibly happen. You have the same kind of a projection that comes over the top of the glass on the right-hand side of that, which is quite deep and extraordinarily thin with no structural system to support it, either below or above it. That can't happen. You have a same kind of appurtenance that sticks out over the dock. That has no columns under it or cables to be able to hold it up.
Looks like it has supports.
And so I'm wondering how all these details are going to be accomplished, especially when I'm not noticing any kind of a grooves in these things for. So are all this brick done with form liners?
Yes.
So that's the reason why the whole thing is incredibly, totally flat. There's no 3D change in these elevations between brick and concrete, so they're all set flush in here with form liners?
Front elevation, east elevation faces the road is actually conventional frame. The office is still out, the strip windows. So that's all conventional framing from roof in here that hold the front.
So you're gonna have a lintel that carries brick that is going to be 100 feet long?
Well, there's structural columns behind that. 45
Okay, that makes more sense.
And on the color elevation on here, it does look like they have cable supports or rod hung
I'm looking at the little one. Well, that makes more sense there.
Not all of them.
Yeah.
I realize this is a data center, and we're not trying to build a jewel box here, but I'm just, it just seems extraordinarily Spartan. And so I guess I'm struggling with that a little bit. And I realize it's a data center. Yeah,
But
that's good.
it's a highly visible data center.
Yeah.
And it's not tucked away.
Isn't the topo higher though? Doesn't the topography go up?
It does from the road.
That doesn't make it less of a problem, it makes it more of a problem.
From the road, it's well over 100 feet in front of the building, so landscaping would be fairly well covered.
Yeah, but we got all the parking out in front of the building, so.
Yeah, I guess one of the things I'm struggling with is just the fact that we have substantially, these incredibly long horizontal lines without any real, breakup of those things at all. And maybe that's the aesthetic. It wants to look, except that it's broken up on all the other elevations.
Yeah, it's all vertical everywhere else. Just
Could they have-
horizontal on the.
Just
So-
something that protrudes, like even columns along the front, give it some depth
I mean,
that come out of floaters.
I don't know how they want to accomplish that, but I guess that perhaps the intent is to make this aesthetic extraordinarily modern, very simplistic and cubic almost, but it seems that if you were going to try to accomplish that kind of aesthetic, you do it with slicker materials. You do it with aluminum or metal or something. I'm not proposing that they put those materials on. It just seems to be a juxtaposition between material use and aesthetic. So,
Making valid points on all of those issues in terms of the canopies, the loading dock, those are still supported. They are thin structures, they range it, but they are supported with steel frame. In terms of the front elevation, yes, sir, it was meant to be clean, simplistic. It is a combination structure, but it is square, just for the function and layout.
all those tie together. So we've done, well, as best we could, we tried to match everything within the ordinance. We're going down to see whatever we do. Quite honestly, it's city council.
Nothing's going to be in here. I mean, there's not much space to put extra landscaping. I like the idea of removing that and saving it for later.
I don't think that's really our purview, though. I mean, it's,
Yeah. So, and we would, go ahead.
I suggest that as far, it seems what I'm hearing, the back three sides, with the exception of a parapet, would be preferred, although there might be a water intrusion concern, probably okay aesthetic-wise on the other three walls. The front elevation, if I understand everything right, there's two concerns. Number one, that there would be some variation in depth across the front, since it is the main elevation. Maybe there's the opportunity to pull something around. The at least mentioned the tilt of construction occurs back a good 40 feet or so, and that's the wall that you're seeing above. It's not that it was unfinished per se, it was just pulled back, having an administrative area a good bit more well-defined than the data center and all of its supporting structure. That's the reason for the aesthetic. But that would be more pleasing to the group, and certainly would look at that. Our concern is the timeline, whether you're aware of that, just recently asked for this first year in the first place. You see, if we were on the right track, they thought city council. So that's why we're here tonight.
Well, those are, ours are just suggestions.
this is just a courtesy review thing.
This courtesy review, but there's, the opportunity for a lot of landscaping to be put in front of the equipment yard area. You've got some green space, so I would say, you should put some substantial size evergreens or hollies or whatever at the time that's built to help with the screening.
And a wall that's sufficiently tall enough to hide all the equipment.
And a four-sided building that matches all the way around.
Yeah. And we can't, although we'd like to see fewer parking spaces, we can't, make you go through a variance procedure through the city council. That was just a suggestion.
The little pavilion, I guess it's a smoking pavilion? Is that what? That's a smoking pavilion at that location in the front? It's not, it doesn't show up on the rendering as such, but it is showing up on the elevations.
Must be what this square is.
It could be transformer or something.
The exterior fence, it says it's a decorative fence. Are we, what kind, it's shown like it has a combination of piers and ornamental iron or something like that. What type of fencing are we talking about there?
It's a rear screen wall on where the drive aisle is, and turning back along the property line with an aluminum or black ornamental fence. The back of the property line were made aware that it could be a black vinyl chain link fence on the back side of the property line, in the back of the building, back to the back property line.
So where it says ornate security fence on the north side of the building, that looks like it's 20 feet off of the building itself. That's really...
That's like a black aluminum ornamental fence.
Okay. So then just the rear along Walmart area is the chain link.
Right.
So then it's ornamental on the south property line on the north side and along the street side, but just chain link at the rear. Okay. Now, does it have masonry piers, or is it just merely the fence? It appears on the plan as though there's masonry piers.
I believe it's just going to be a fence. Ornamental along the sides. It's meant to be a fence.
Okay.
And I wanted to mention one thing about the equipment yard. One of the issues with the height of that equipment screen wall is as we take the wall higher, above 8 feet, it reduces the airflow into the chillers. And you start needing to either expand that equipment yard or perforating the wall to allow the airflow to get to the chillers, and then you run into the noise issues. So we put the wall basically at the top of the equipment, gave them enough room to get the airflow, the proper airflow into it. And so we can get that balance between noise and air intrusion into that area. That's why that height of that wall is 8 feet.
But they're not,
The equipment's getting-
but that equipment is not visible from,
I said there may be a piece or two that's on top of the generator that you would see if you were standing there, but that equipment yard is 4 feet down from the finished floor. So where you're seeing that screen wall in the front, as you're on the street level, as you're looking up, you'd never see the equipment yard from the street level. Because you actually have to go over that wall and then you're back down 4 feet to where the loading dock is. And that's where that 8-foot screen wall sits.
Well, where's the 12-foot wall you mentioned earlier?
They're both 8 feet.
Okay.
Well, actually, in other instances where we've had loading docks in that location, we've actually required the loading dock to be screened as well, too.
The loading dock is
So-
behind the front screen wall.
Well, yeah, but it's only an 8-foot screen wall, so you put a semi-truck in there and you see the top half of the semi-truck.
But on the back side of that screen wall is 4 feet down, so the back side of that front screen wall, as you drive through that fence, you go down.
That's not as it's drawn here. Unless your doors are 15-foot doors. It looks to me like the screen wall is maybe 4.5, 5 feet from the grade at the front of the building. It would be 8 feet at the loading dock
It's
side.
8 feet from the loading dock side. It's 4
So,
feet
so it's 4 feet
from
screen
the
wall
front
there.
side, yeah.
So you've got another 4, if a semi is sitting there at 14 feet tall, you've got the difference.
I mean, that screen wall height could be raised, if that's the issue. There's no issue with the height of that wall, that was just it's the equipment yard wall that we just don't
Well,
raise.
what we may want to do is actually increase the height of that wall, which then would help screen the equipment screens that are further back,
And the dock.
and the dock itself.
You get a twofer.
can we solve it all if we move it to the back? And then it can just expand on the side.
The good news is somebody wants to build something in Milton again. That's pretty
That's
nice.
fantastic. It would be a more attractive fence if it had some concrete or brick pillars in it or something.
Maybe security fence probably gonna have slats and stuff in it even.
I mean, couldn't they just put it on the side?
I just, the whole loading dock area doesn't look like it works to get a truck in and out of there, but I just,
I mean, couldn't this just be put to the back, and then any expansion come here? I mean, you could drive around to the back,
yeah.
and then we don't have those issues. And then future expansion could be,
I mean, I don't know how you, a semi-truck can't get into that loading dock at all.
You have to run auto turn, but it does look pretty stinking tight. I mean, you need a 120-foot radius, so.
Yeah.
Why don't you put it on the back and then have future expansion?
Because they're gonna expand in a linear fashion. Right now, the whole roof pitches to the north, so they're gonna have to continue. The only way that can expand it is to have the same roof pitch and go up to the west. That part makes perfectly good sense.
Change the roof slope.
Well, then you just have to put the walls higher.
Well, no, because basically you want to run it the short way.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it.
No, I mean, the walls around the equipment yard.
And they're right. The simplest thing is just to run one long sheet of roof rather than put a gable in it or anything else. No crickets, no drains, no anything. But it's not going to look great.
Well, I wonder if there's maybe some extension of the building wall out there to help mitigate that view. Again, there's no reason on the office portion itself. You don't have equipment out there. You could have parapets all the way around that.
Or you could fly a parapet. You could actually
Well,
have the
yeah.
roof edge stop,
Yeah.
put a gutter in there, and then fly the parapet proud of the tilt wall.
Yeah.
I mean, there's ways to do it without screwing up the roof.
But regardless, the main portion of the front of the building is all the office space, the support space,
Right.
which isn't critical.
Right.
So
Yeah.
that parapet could definitely turn back
Absolutely.
on that office portion.
Sure. You said it was framed.
And we sure could, yes, sir.
So I think there's some ways to clean it up that are not going to
Yeah.
be super painful.
I'd like to not be able to drive down the road and look onto the roof or the back sides of the parapets.
Does that mechanical equipment run the entire facility or just the data center? So are you going to have pack units on the front of the offices in front? Okay.
Run the entire facility.
That's all I got, Mr. Chairman.
Me too.
Thank you.
Good luck.
Thank you.
We need to work on the wall, the front wall, just all we need to visually explain everything. We'd like to at least review the front elevation, see if there's anything from some additional relief. Hearing that correctly. We'll return the parapet back on the office space. And the colors were accepted. The rest of the documents are okay.
I think we were also talking about still screening the rest of that parapet along the north wall, right?
Yeah,
The
the
rest of it.
whole north wall, we'd like to see some kind of screening of the roof, so the parapet height was a constant height around the building.
Just one comment on that. We tried to not disturb as much as we could on the north side of the building. It's a very heavily wooded area. As you're driving down the road, it's going to be very difficult to see that side of the building.
I think we can't have a partial parapet. I mean, that should wrap and complete
Well,
the building.
right now, it looks like the parking is extending 50-odd feet beyond the end of the building.
Plus, there
So
could
you're
be
gonna
future
see
use.
in there, you're gonna see straight into there because of all that parking, all the clearing that's gonna take place for all the parking that's extending beyond the north of
Yeah.
the building.
Plus, you got to clear past the building a little bit, do extra construction
Yeah,
activities.
so I mean, you're gonna,
Plus, the use may change.
that
and they
that
put
end of the
more parking.
building's gonna be
Putting
highly
additional-
visible.
At least visible.
Yeah.
And with those three components, will we be amenable to this project? Have any concerns during our design review process going forward?
Did you add the equipment screening to your list?
Well, we talked about the front wall.
Front wall doing that, right.
To effectively screen both.
Gotcha. What about the noise issues, though?
Yeah,
Well, this is, I mean, it's I guess it's already allowed use. I mean, this is just a,
Right.
this is a building permit.
It's not a rezoning or anything.
And there's no residences around it, it's all commercial stuff around it. Thank you,
I
sir.
mean, I've built screen walls taller than 8 feet around 12, 14 foot. The yard may have to get slightly larger, but not substantially larger, I don't think.
Yeah, put in yard screen wall.
I'd like to see it at least cover the equipment that's in there. Otherwise, why build a wall at all?
Exactly.
Thank you. Oh, you're going to have greenhouses for neighbors.
And you do have residential next door.
Oh, that's true, yeah.
You mentioned the landscaping.
We did.
Yeah, I know, I don't know if he summarized it that way, but yes.
You want this stuff, right?
Mr. Chairman, move that we adjourn?
Second.
Aye.
You were lucky.